And most important of all, rivers are resilient, and that is something I really love about them. You know, one of my favorite memories is going back more than a decade when I was in Augusta, Maine in July of 1999 for the removal of the Edwards Dam on the Kennebec River. That dam had been there for 164 years. Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote about salmon butting their noses into that dam. That just gives you a way to think about how long it had been there. And yet within a season when that dam had been removed, salmon were back to their prime spawning habitat, the river had recovered, and great things were happening. And so that's really, if of all the things that I love about rivers, I think it's that resilience, that capacity for restoration that gives me a sense of hope. You know, it gives me a sense that even in the face of just all the things that we're up against in the 21st century, that rivers, we give them a little bit of help and they will pay us back through their ability to become restored. So anyhow, those are the kinds of things that have kept me going at this subject all these years, and I think will keep me going for many more, I hope. So I've come to the Department of Interior at the end of a fairly long career already. I'd been in, as Wendy said, I'd been in the conservation movement for 30 years prior to coming to the department. And when I first moved to Washington, I actually was really dream come true to work for Gaylord Nelson. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Gaylord, but he was the founder of Earth Day, just a champion of the conservation movement when he was governor in Wisconsin and when he came to the United States Senate and served there for 3 terms. So working for him as his environmental legislative aide was just extremely special and what I think really put me solidly on this course. And so to sort of end up my career now at the department is an equally treasured moment and something I feel very honored and privileged to be working for Secretary Salazar. If there is a bigger champion for rivers in the United States government, I don't know who that would be. He truly believes in the value of rivers and the importance of the job that the Department of the Interior is doing with respect to protecting and restoring and making rivers assets for our communities all across the country, whether we're talking about human communities or wildlife, natural communities. So you all probably know that a couple of years ago, in the spring of 2010, President Obama launched a conservation initiative with a lot of help from Secretary Salazar called America's Great Outdoors, and that's become the signature conservation initiative of this administration. So that was the spring of 2010, and to determine what was going to be part of this initiative, many listening sessions were held across the country. And one of the things that came up time after time after time was how important rivers are to the American communities. And so what happened as a result of all of that groundswell of support is that when the America's Great Outdoors Initiative was sort of stood up and established, it was built on 3 pillars, and one of those 3 pillars is rivers. And I'll just tell you the other two. One of the other two is urban parks, and the third one in this trilogy is large landscapes. But rivers were one of 3 pillars, and so Secretary Salazar, I'm sure, had something to do with that, in addition to all of the citizens who spoke up about rivers. But time passed, and I came to the department last August, and in January of this year, Secretary Salazar decided that he wanted to launch a specific rivers initiative as part of America's Great Outdoors. And so he asked me to do some thinking about that, had me work with a number of colleagues from across the department to think through what it might be. And in January, the very end of January, this was announced. So we've only been in business for a handful of months, but we're moving at a fast pace because we know the clock is short that we have a lot of work to get done before the end of the year. So we've been at work for a few months now. We have sort of two broad areas of endeavor. One is river recreation, making rivers more accessible and making them valued assets to communities. And the second area is river restoration, rivers as habitat, rivers as migration corridors. So those are the two sides of the initiative, the recreation side and the restoration side. And it's because rivers have these qualities that I was alluding to moments ago. I mean, they're great ways to connect people to the out of doors. They're close to home for every community. They are great wildlife habitat, and they allow people a chance to get involved, whether they're coming just for a weekend or an afternoon river cleanup, or maybe they're going to get involved in something much larger, like 60 years of effort on the Connecticut River watershed. People have things that they can do on a volunteer basis or as a public servant to get involved with rivers. So we have a sort of a three-part strategy for this initiative, again, with very short time and very limited resources. We've chosen to focus on doing three kinds of things. One is demonstration projects, highlighting projects that are worthy models, sort of showing the way by picking out some projects around the country. The second thing we want to do is make it easier. Find ways through some of the new technology to collect up the tools and services and abilities that are already out there and make it easier for both our own colleagues within the federal family, but also the people we work with at the state and local level and in the grassroots to access the things that we have available to us in the way of technical knowledge and capacities and some grant monies as well. Excuse me. And the third element of this strategy is inspiration, so that we can put these ideas out there through stories and through events and through gatherings, and hopefully give other communities the idea that, hey, we have a river, and maybe we could have some of that good stuff in our community as well. So show the way, make it easier, and inspire involvement. That's sort of the three parts of our strategy. At this point, we've stood up a few program elements. Wendy referred to one. We've picked out a project in each of the 50 states, plus the districts. We have 51 All-American River projects around the country. The way we got these projects is that we asked Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Bureau of Reclamation to look across their river-related projects and sort of lift up the ones that they thought would make good models to be these demonstrations of what we're doing and some of the best stuff that we're doing. So we got a lot of nominations from across the country. We had to go through a winnowing process and a selection process because we only had one slot per state. And we tried to get some diversity too. We tried to have different kinds of projects, different kinds of problems that were being attacked. Anyhow, we ended up with 51 projects. And 2 weeks ago, we had our rollout where every day for 5 days we put out a press release and identified the projects in 5 different regions of the country. So those projects are all out there. Again, they were projects that were nominated by the bureaus, so they're already up and running. We have a leader in each case. We're working with the leader to make sure that we are going to really learn the lessons of these projects, capture what they know, and make it available, share it with others. So that's one part of the work. And within that work, there's lots of, Wendy mentioned 13, 14 programs, projects up here in New England, many of which are being led by the Fish and Wildlife Service, many of which have to do with fish passage. So a lot of what you do is reflected in these projects. We have, so that's one element.